E. Give me that. Give me that. Aggie Pride all day. We're in the building representing from North Carolina A&T State University. And we're in the building for Hip Hop Caucus to have this great and amazing, wonderful conversation. But I just had to put this on just to let you know who I was representing tonight. Shout out to our president, Rev Yearwood, who went to that other college up there in DC called Howard University. This is for you, Rev Yearwood, just so you know. We're having a good time tonight. What's up, Brandon? Talk to us.
Definitely. So tonight, like I said, we have a great episode. Rev and Administrator Regan discussed a lot this episode, such as how his personal and professional life experiences prepared him for this moment, his internship with the EPA directly upon his graduation from college, and his vision for the EPA to put communities of color at the forefront of EJ issues. TC, what does that look like? What does it look like to put communities of color, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities at the forefront of these environmental justice issues?
First, before I say anything, I just want to let y'all know that Aggies do. So this is not like no big thing that he's the EPA administrator. Aggies do. We always do. We going to the moon. We going everywhere. We're engineers, we're scientists. So Aggies just do all. We're the number one HBCU. So of course, we're going to produce those that are in the high positions. But to answer that question, one of the things, as you can see, I'm so excited that an Aggie is doing such great things. But here's the reality, Brandon, as we represent the Hip Hop Caucus, we are not necessarily, we're as we say, post-partisan. So we're a nonpartisan organization. We don't represent parties, but we're post. And what do I mean by post? Meaning that once you get elected, what are you going to do after that? So I'm happy that a fellow Aggie is the EPA administrator. But the question really remains. He's wanting to concentrate on Black and Brown that are actually hit hardest and the worst due to climate change, and hit hardest and the worst due to climate justice issues and environmental justice issues. And we are hoping that he gets into the office and has what he needs and does what he needs to do, having been part of the EPA before he became the administrator, to know where the areas that he needs to concentrate on. So we're bigging him up as an Aggie, but as a Hip Hop Caucus, we're holding him to what he says he's going to do. We're not in a situation where we can play. This is not playtime. We're at a desperate time. And since he's an Aggie, this is our lunch counter moment. What are we going to do? We don't have a lot of time to deal with this climate issue. So we look for him to do great things, and we support him to do great things. But I will close with this, Brandon. We're seeing a lot of people in position, but not doing what they should do in those positions. And we just want to lend support, positive energy. And I'm glad that Rev Yearwood had a chance to sit down with a fellow Aggie to see what he's going to do. But it is very necessary. It is very crucial that the Black and Brown communities, as we see all across the country, all the people that deal with petrochemical situations in Texas, Louisiana, Cancer Alley, and all of the legacy of things that have been done around the issues of climate justice, that he represents that and speaks to those injustices so that we can see that this issue that we're fighting, climate change, can be addressed from the standpoint of those hit hardest and worst. So I'm just excited. It's the Hip Hop Caucus, and you already know I just need to shut up, and let's just go ahead and hear that conversation from Rev Yearwood and Michael Regan, because they ain't come to see us. So
right. Thank you, TC. So without further ado, here's the episode of the Coolest Show featuring Rev Yearwood and EPA Administrator Michael Regan. Thank you.
This is the Coolest Show, brought to you by Hip Hop Caucuses. Think 100%.
It's the coolest show, keep the culture connected. It's the coolest show, in your ear, yeah, respected. Expert level information, entertainment, education. Rev Yearwood got you covered as you hit your destination. Climate rules everything around me. Cream. For those who lost focus, close your eyes and just dream. Open your third eye, now the world is your off. Coolest show, it's the Hip Hop Caucus.
Well, I'm very excited for this conversation here on the Coolest Show. I'm so happy to have my dear brother with me, the Environmental Protection Agency's Administrator, Michael Regan. My brother Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm glad to be on the coolest show. That makes me cool, right?
It does actually make you very, very cool. And you're actually doing the good work to keep us all cool on this planet. So we want to thank you for that as well. I want to get right to some serious conversation here. But before I get to all those questions, I have my first question I need you to really think about this tonight. But it's not a knee jerk. I don't need you just to respond. Don't blurt this out. So this is take a second to think this one through. This could be one of the most important questions during this interview. So just take your time on this one. And that is simply, who has the baddest marching band, Howard University or North Carolina A&T? Take your time now. Don't rush the answer. But make sure you think that one through.
I'm gonna take a little bit of time just to present the notion that I'm balanced. But after this pause, which has been way too long, there's no meaner machine than the A&T Aggie marching machine.
Oh man, my goodness. Well, this was a quick interview right here, so I just no, I thank you for that. I and that's fair game. When we have on the vice president, we're going to see if her answer's the same. That's what we gotta figure that one out in that.
That's not fair, Rev. That's not fair.
Oh man, this is a blessing. For those that don't know you yet, please tell the audience, who is Michael Regan?
I'm just a regular guy from Goldsboro, North Carolina. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, hunting and fishing with my dad and my granddad, and just learning to enjoy life and nature through their lens of talking about their lived experiences and just being outdoors, soaking up as much as I could from them. Left Goldsboro and moved to Greensboro to go to North Carolina A&T State University. My father graduated from A&T, and I really wanted to follow in his footsteps and get the Black experience and be in an environment that I thought I would be safe to be myself while I pursued education. And that was the best decision I could have made in life. I grew up loving nature. I studied environmental science at A&T. And my first job, I ended up at EPA as an intern and then as an employee, able to focus on the things that mattered the most to me, which was environmental protection and public health. I grew up with respiratory illnesses that resembled asthma. And so on the high ozone action days or a lot of dust, a lot of pollution, that prevented me from being outdoors with my dad and my grandfather. So I missed out on hunting and fishing because of pollution. And at an early age, it gave me this awareness that something needed to be done. So I'm just a regular individual trying to apply what God has given me to give back through the lens of public service and making sure that as we do this, that the least amongst us is just as protected as those who have been traditionally protected throughout history.
Mm-hmm. I thank you for that. And I hope that a lot of folks who are listening to that realize that you can, and your story is amazing, that you can go from intern to administrator. That's a powerful testimony in itself. I mean, that's just something that is great. And so, and it matters. You also mentioned, and we were joking at the beginning of this about our HBCU experience, and HBCU experience is truly an American experience. I mean,
yes,
it is a part of our DNA, and it makes our country just a better place. How does your Black identity shape your work at this point?
It's who I am, obviously. I mean, it is my experience, and there is no secret here that when we think about the Black community, life's experiences aren't always fair. Life's experiences are not always equitable. And so as I approach this work and think about environmental protection and public health, I'm keenly aware that our communities, my community, your community, our communities are disproportionately impacted by pollution, which means they're plagued with health disparities. They're plagued with barriers around education and access to, food and, just so many barriers that have created, disadvantages in terms of that competitive step for life. So I have that lens, and as the administrator, I'm looking at the power of EPA and who we can protect and how we can protect. And I'm hell-bent on making sure that this is a rising tide moment. And as we tackle climate change, as we tackle the water crisis, as we tackle land pollution, it will be done through a justice and equity lens to be sure that no community is left behind. I think far too often we believe that in order for someone to benefit, someone has to be left behind or not benefit. And that's just a perverted way of looking at society. I truly believe that we can approach these very tough issues in a manner where no one and no community should be left behind. And that's what the Biden administration is all about.
Thank you for that. And I'll tell you this from the jump, one of the things that's so important to me is that, and like you, I served my country. I was an officer in the Air Force. So like you, we chose to serve our country, and we're not serving our country based upon Democrat or Republican. We just want every American in this country to do well. We want every American to have clean air, clean water. And if you don't want clean air, clean water, then maybe that's you. But I think most of us want clean air and clean water. But as you know, as the world is watching, Congress for literally that definitive action on climate. And it's a process right now, and we'll leave it there. But tell us, what is the EPA's role in regulating when other federal branches and agencies fail to pass legislation?
Let me say this. My role right now, I've got two hats. One is I'm going to continue to lean in and follow the president's lead and engage with Congress so that we can get the best deal possible for the American people. We have to act now. We don't have time to waste. That's on the climate front, but we also can't forget that in that Build Back Better deal, there's billions of dollars for water infrastructure, water quality, Superfund sites, cleaning up polluted land. So we got to have it all. That being said, irrespective of whatever Congress does, we have the statutory authority to pursue eliminating pollution. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to exercise my full authority as the EPA administrator to push regulations as far as we can, acknowledging that markets and technologies are driving us to do better and be better. But we're going to push regulations as far as we can to protect the American people. And by the way, we're going to look at these regulations through a lens of equity and justice. We're going to make up for those past transgressions by not pretending that they didn't happen and think about how we can go back and correct some of those mistakes. But as we look forward, we're going to be sure that all of our rules have an equity lens applied to them. So you saw us propose and finalize a rule on HFCs, a very potent greenhouse gas that we're going to reduce 85% of over the next 15 years. We've proposed and we're working on finalizing emission standards for light duty vehicles and trucks. By the way, thank you and your organization for weighing in during the comment period. And I can assure you, we heard you. We're gonna really look at proposing the most stringent oil and gas regulation that this country has ever seen in a matter of weeks, if not months, to reduce not just the climate threat of methane, but those potent organic chemicals that plague many of our communities because they reside in close proximity to these refineries. And then we're gonna produce a very durable but strong regulation on power plants, right? We're gonna really put the pressure on these power plants and reduce CO2 and those pollutants that are plaguing our communities at a local level. So that's a long way of me saying EPA has a lot of tools in its toolbox to continue to put the pressure on greenhouse gas pollution and health-based pollution, even if Congress doesn't act. But I'm confident that Congress will act. And together with Congress, I believe we're going to see historic investments and regulations that benefit all communities.
Man, listen, I'm praying with you on that one. Let me tell you right now, you can let all the folks know. I don't care where they sit. Tell them that Rev is praying and we can get it right, because that's important, because when we have long gone past our time on this side of Jordan, these decisions will have an impact on future generations.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that, let me speak to that. As you know, this show, just so folks understand, this show is specifically talking to young people, specifically young people of color, Black and brown and Indigenous. So there are many other environmental shows, but this show speaks to that. So just want to make sure folks are listening in that aspect. So that's the connotation of what we always do here on the Coolest Show.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, you know, knowing that people of color and poor people are first and worst hit by this climate crisis, what are you doing to make sure that those Black, brown, and Indigenous people are in the future?
You know, we have to have our young folks as part of the vision here. And this is one of the things that I've admired so much about you and your movement and this show, is the recognition that every major social movement in history has been led by young folks. And so if we're going to be successful, we have to really bring in our young people. I've created a seat at the table for young people and for people of color in every step of the way we've moved over the 8 months I've been here. It's my belief that we don't need to wait until the policy or regulation is developed and then go out and test it. We need to bring people in at the beginning. And so I put out, you know, a demand to all of my staff: give me a full accounting of how environmental justice and equity plays a role in every policy, every regulation, every contract, all of our procurement. And they've done that. They've done a very thorough evaluation, and we've developed principles and approaches that we are leveraging to bring Black and brown people to the table and young people to the table. It's my belief that if they cannot see themselves in our vision, then we won't be able to execute on that. I've also hosted roundtables with presidents and chancellors and executives from HBCUs all across the country to help me understand, how do we get more Black and brown folks in the pipeline? But also on the research and development side, how can EPA help drive grant dollars towards these institutions so that they can help us solve these complex problems? You know, it's a coexistence, right? I mean, we're here to provide protection to the public, but we also want to hear from the public on how that should be done. So we're trying to do that in the most diverse way possible. And I'm really proud of what we've done so far, recognizing we got a whole lot more work to do.
You know, let me speak to that, and let me follow up on that aspect, because you as you know, out of the now 16 EPA administrators, 14 were white, and there was only one woman of color. My dear friend, actually, former Administrator Lisa P. Jackson over there at Apple now, and actually, I don't know if you knew this. I did a documentary, and she was in it. She was one of the co-stars, and she got her movie. She got her movie credit came through Rev here, so I don't know. She got a lot of credit stuff, so probably doesn't come up. But as you're talking about young people, and let's just keep it frank. One of the things we have been dealing with as a movement is that, unfortunately, this movement, people don't think that people of color are engaging in this movement, and so we need to change that, and we need to make sure that all Americans feel a part of this movement. But what has been your experience as the first Black male EPA administrator been so far?
I'm humbled. It's definitely not lost on me that I'm the first Black male administrator, Black man as administrator. I spent time talking to Lisa on this very topic, because I believe every day that I'm blessed to walk into this office, it needs to be intentional. And so as I conduct my daily job, I'm constantly reflecting on what are we doing to protect the American people, but more importantly, what are we doing to ensure that all people see themselves in the work that we're doing? I worked for Environmental Defense Fund. I've worked for the state of North Carolina. And I can tell you sometimes, and you probably recognize this too, Rev, that in this space, you can enter lots of rooms and be the only Black person in the room.
That's right.
And so my goal is we need to have diversity in every single room that I'm in. So I'm constantly looking for ways to open doors, to be more transparent, and to get beyond this myth that Black and brown and tribal people are not interested in the environment. It's obvious that they are interested, we are interested, but it's also obvious that through systematic racism and other mechanisms in this country, we have not always been invited into the room. We have to break that down in a systemic way. And so in addition to our regulations and actions, I'm also working on an infrastructure here at EPA that will be forced to recognize diversity and justice and equity long after I'm gone.
I love that. I'm gonna tell you, you singing the music to my ears, because I think that, if we don't have that, then we're not going to be successful.
Right.
Let's talk about that right quick, because we know when people listen to this conversation, we will actually be in the midst of COP26. What are your thoughts around COP26? What is EPA trying to accomplish, if anything, during that time frame?
Well, I can tell you personally, when I'm in Scotland, I'm going to be excited to sort of build on what you and I just discussed, which is on a.
Well, hold on. Is this your first time in Scotland?
It will be. This will be
Okay.
my first trip to Scotland. And as administrator, to be on an international stage leading the environmental charge for the Biden administration, I think the world will see that Black people are interested in environmental protection. It's a platform for us to reflect on how the world can see us differently as people of color who are interested, but also as people of color who are in power to change things. So that's a goal of mine, to be sure that we demonstrate that and we're walking that walk. EPA, we're going to be there talking about our regulatory authority, just as I walked you through, especially around methane. There's a global methane pledge because we understand how potent methane emissions are. And our proposed rule, which we hope to have out soon, will serve as the foundation for what this country will do to reduce methane emissions, again, for climate reasons, but also for health reasons. We're going to talk about the power we have to regulate power plants. We're going to talk about the power we have to regulate cars and trucks and heavy duty vehicles. We're going to talk about what we're doing to reduce HFCs. I mean, this is going to be a muscular presentation. EPA, again, we hope that we get some of the resources that are in the Build Back Better agenda, and I'm confident that we will. But if we don't, Rev, this agency has the power and authority to regulate these climate pollutants and protect public health. And I'm here to tell the world that we're going to do it.
Well, I just have a few more questions. I can't thank you enough for your time. I do want to speak to this. I don't think one thing, I haven't loved watching you take a lot of your oath pictures. And then let me just say that your son in the pictures is as sharp as the Board of Health as you are right now. I got to figure out where y'all get your suits from. That's y'all keeping it clean. It's got to be some North Carolina tailor down there somewhere. So I got to figure that one out. But let's speak about that. Let's, in this role you're in, the consequences of inaction. And you understand, as much as people are, there are folks who unfortunately are putting their profits and sometimes before what to make the change we need to make. But inaction is not possible. When you think about this and you think about our children, because also I have some have two boys too, as well. When you think about that in the next generation, are you hopeful that we are going to succeed? And I know that there's a immediate reaction. Yes, we got to do it. But that real knowing the science and knowing where we are. I saw recently the UN put out a commercial with a dinosaur. They had a dinosaur warning people about extinction. And that to me that blew my mind. And so when you think about that we're literally warning ourselves about extinction.
Yeah.
And you're in this position to help stop the extinction of humanity. One, how does that weigh on you? And are you hopeful?
It's heavy. It's heavy. I will tell you that every morning that I walk out the door and I kiss my son on the cheek and tell him to have a good day, I'm thinking about his future every single day. When I look at the environmental justice analysis that we did, Rev, if we see a 2-degree increase in temperature due to global warming, 34% of African Americans are more likely to live in areas that will see increased childhood asthma. 40% of Black people are more likely to live in communities to see increased deaths from heat and temperature rise. Right? This is, we talk about extinction, which is scary, but I'm also focused on the more immediate, that if we don't curtail these temperature rises, that we're going to see health disparities. We're going to see issues that we've never seen before. And this is in my son and your son's lifetime. So every day I walk out the door, I'm thinking we don't have a moment to waste for my children, for your children, for all of our children. And I think if we're going to give them a competitive step to pick up the baton and run with what we're going to hand them, I want to do as much as possible. I kind of think about, the older folks in our families that say that they pray for themselves, but they also pray for the next generation. They believe that those blessings that they passed on would give us a competitive edge so that we can move forward. Well, that's exactly how I think about this job. I want to do as much as possible every single day so that when we pass that baton, we're passing them a baton for a race that they can actually win. That's the way I'm approaching this every single day.
That's amazing. There's two more questions for you. One, where can we find that report assessment you just referenced?
That report is located on our website. So you can go to EPA.gov and you can look up the EJ analysis. And I'll also have my team push that information to you so that you can push that out as well. But it is it's a historic report, Rev. And it really, it gets well beyond this feeling of, disproportionate impact. It talks in great detail with data about how Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by climate, by lead, by lots of these issues that we've been plagued with for far too long.
Whew. There's two more. This is my final questions here, and then I have a cultural question. So this is my final question. This really for you, and that is, how can people keep up with your work? We got a lot of folks both in the suites and the streets who follow the Coolest Show, and how can they support you at EPA?
Number one, I am so thankful for all of the organizations that reach out directly to EPA to say, we want to support you. And in return, Rev, it's not just the big green groups and it's not just the traditional stakeholders. We're sifting through and combing through. So if people have an idea and if people want to get involved, this EPA and this administration is ready. And listen, people will tell you on my EPA Twitter handle, people reach out to me all the time. I respond. I send that to my staff, and we're meeting with everyday people who have concerns about climate, clean water, and clean air. We all takers, come all. This is something that we all have to be engaged and involved in, and we're ready to listen to everybody.
All right. Well, your first question, you gave an honest answer on that, on the A&T marching band, but this one here. So my last question for you is this one. All right. So You can pick dead or alive in this one too. If you got to create a hip hop Mount Rushmore, you get 4 people to put on that Mount Rushmore. What artists are you going to put on that Mount Rushmore? Who is the Michael Regan hip hop Mount Rushmore right now?
Wow, that's a tough one, man. I think that just to keep us all enlightened and informed, I got to have KRS-One up there. I grew up at a time where KRS-One and Chuck D, took it from entertainment to keeping us enlightened. So I think KRS-One is obviously one. I'm a big Nas fan. Nas is one of the greatest. He's got to be there. Of course, Jay-Z, I think in terms of lyrics and trying to deliver a message and awaken that consciousness, I think Jay's got to be there. And then I guess I'll bring it up a little bit and say that, Kendrick Lamar is an artist, So, those are sort of some of the ones that I think have influenced me in terms of wanting to be entertained, but also be educated. And then the last one I'll throw out there is Black Thought, and the Roots, from the Roots. So, it's hard, right? When you try to create a Mount Rushmore, it's hard because I don't know how you are, but when I wake up, many days I'm looking for different things from music, and there's so many different artists that can kind of feed that. But when I think back on what has shaped me in terms of hip hop music, those are the ones that I think have really helped me hone in on entertainment, education, and how to be more conscientious as I approach life.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want to rephrase. This is I want to make sure, because I want nobody to be mad at Rev. I want to make sure that I know Mount Rushmore. We understand that we have a lot of folks in our Indigenous community, so I want to make sure this is the Michael Regan Mountain. It's top 4. Let's make sure we want to say this is the EPA Administrator's top 4. We want everybody to be happy and listening here. So you heard it from him. You got his top 4 in there. I just want to mention that, you didn't mention J. Cole. Now, J. Cole from North Carolina. So listen, yes. I ain't trying to start and I won't beat nothing, but I just want to mention. We'll give him honorable mention in that process.
I love J. Cole, man. And, the thing about it is most of the artists that I mentioned, came before Jay. So they helped, they were shaping me a little bit.
Man, you gonna do fantastic. I tell you, you got that's. I love it. My dear brother, thank you so much for being with us here on The Coolest Show, and definitely praying for your success, because your success is our success.
I appreciate it, Rev. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, brother, for your leadership, and thank you for your voice. It is so needed and so appreciated.
No, thank you. And that's our guest today. That is EPA Administrator Michael Regan, and I am Rev Yearwood, your host of The Coolest Show. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.